our cookies are all baked and cut out and cooled, and now we're ready to mix up our colors of icing for decorating. So for this cookie, we are going to be doing the bowling pin in white and the bowling ball in red, and then there's going to be a couple of little accents. So on the bowling pin, I'm going to do the 2 red stripes, and then on the bowling ball, I'm going to do a little bit of a white accent to give it the look of depth, and then the 3 black spots. So a tiny bit of black, and then the rest will be red and white. And I'm going to do all of these in a flood consistency, which means that it will be a consistency that will naturally level itself out to create a flat, smooth surface once we're done icing the cookies. So I have my buttercream mixed up here, and it's already mixed up to a flood consistency. So what that means is that when I was making my buttercream, I mixed it up according to the recipe, and then I just continued to add gradually more half and half until it got to the right consistency. And you can tell, looking at it right now, you can tell that the top is completely flat, and it does that on its own. And then if you stir it up a little bit, and then you lift some up with your spatula, and you drop it, well, this might actually be a little bit thicker than what I'm looking for. So it seems like maybe this has actually thickened up a little bit since I first mixed it. So I might need to add a little bit of half and half to it in order to get it to the consistency that I want it, but we'll see. What we want is a consistency that will flatten itself out. So if it flattens itself out in the bowl, then it will flatten itself out on the cookie. And you can kind of shake it a little bit, just like you can shake your cookie. Tap on it a little bit, and then you can see it does actually smooth itself out. So this consistency should be fine. So the consistency we're looking for here with a flood consistency that will smooth itself out on the cookie is one that will naturally flatten it out in the bowl, just like it'll naturally flatten out on the cookie. So right here, it's smooth in the bowl, which we can pretty much assume will mean it will be smooth on the cookie. But another test you can do is you can lift up some, and then it globs, and then it kind of comes down in like a little bit of a ribbon. That means it's a good consistency. You see how it's ribboning down there? That's great. That's just what we're looking for. And then if we count to 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. By the time I got to 20, it's completely leveled out. All of the little ridges and everything from where I had lifted that icing out and dropped it back on had completely disappeared down into itself and created a nice flat surface. That's what we're looking for. You do want it to be approximately 20 seconds. If it smooths out faster than 20 seconds, you will run the risk of your icing being too runny and running off the edges of your cookie too easily. We want it to be thick enough that we can easily decorate the cookie without the icing all running off the edges and making a mess. But we want it to be thin enough that it will eventually smooth itself out to a nice flat surface. And even if that means jiggling your cookie a little bit like this to get that to happen, that's okay, because ultimately it will be smooth and flat, but it won't run off the edge, and that's what that 20-second consistency is talking about. Let's go ahead and fill our first bag with this white icing, since we are going to use plain white for the bowling pin. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make 2 different bags of white. So I'm going to do one bag for making the pins, and that's going to have more icing in it. And then I'm going to do one bag for making the little marks on the bowling ball that's going to give that ball the shine and depth that we want. That's going to be a much smaller bag because that's just tiny. The reason I'm going to do two different bags is because these are tipless piping bags, and I'm just going to cut off the tip myself with scissors. I'm going to cut a very tiny cut, very small hole for the tiny little accents that go on the ball. And I'm going to cut a slightly larger hole for using on the bowling pin because I want it to be big enough that it doesn't take me 10 hours to get the icing to come out to make the bowling pin. I want it to come out pretty easily so that I can flood that quickly and not waste a lot of time. So that's why I'm going to do two different bags for the white. Okay, so since we're not changing the color of the white, I don't need to do any mixing of it. I'm just going to put it straight in the bag. You're just going to want to use some type of a nice cup because that will hold your bag for you. You stick your hand in it, stick it down in the cup, fold the tops over, and there you have a ready to fill icing bag. So here we go. I'm going to get some white icing in here, and this is the one that I will fill up with more icing. I find that usually just filling it to the top of the cup is a pretty good amount that still leaves you room to easily twist off and close the top. If you overfill it beyond that point, you run out of space for twisting off and sealing the top of your bag. Now, this is not enough space for me to tie a knot in it. What I use is these little plastic bag clips. I ordered these on Amazon. I think that it said they were, oh yeah, it says IKEA on them. So these originally came from IKEA, but I found them on Amazon. They're really perfect for what we're doing here. I never have any problems with them failing. I've never had any break. You just stick this clip right over the twisted end of your bag and you clip it together and it holds it and seals it. And I put a lot of pressure on my piping bags when I'm squeezing them and piping, and I've never had the top come apart or burst. So I feel like they work really well. All right, so this is our first bag of white ready to go. I'm not going to cut the tip off until I'm ready to start decorating, just because it can start leaking out the tip and no need to make a mess. Okay, now we're going to do our smaller bag of white just for those little accents. And honestly, that's probably all we need because we're doing a really small amount. I'm trying to think, I don't think there's anything else I'll need that for besides those little accents. So this is a small amount. I'm just going to use my fingers to push that icing down as far as I can get it. Okay. Now with this one, because we have so much space left at the top, we can just tie a knot. And if you'd like to do that, that is certainly another option. There we go. And now I'll just trim off the top of that bag. And now we have our nice little mini icing bag. Okay, now we get to mix up a color. So let's mix up some red. Now for red, I'm going to be using this AmeriColor Super Red. This is a gel food coloring. I do have some other, I have an assortment of different food colorings that I use. I have these little gel tubes that I've just picked up from the grocery store. I have a smaller super red that I got in an assortment pack from Amazon. But I bought this larger one just simply because red is a color that I use a lot of, especially at Christmas time. And so I wanted to have a larger quantity of that one. Okay. I want this to be a pretty saturated red color, so I added quite a bit of food coloring in there. Usually, if you're not going for a super saturated color, you're going to want to start with a very small amount of food coloring at first and then gradually add more. But bowling balls tend to be pretty dark saturated colors. So I just went ahead and I was very liberal with the amount of red that I squeezed in there. You can see it's starting to come together pretty quickly. And there we have our red. Now, because I added quite a bit of food coloring, it did make my icing a lot runnier, as you can see. Let's see, what is the count now? It's definitely more ribbony. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is more of a 10-second consistency at this point. So it might be difficult to use this for my bowling balls because it's going to be so runny. So what I might need to do is add some extra powdered sugar to thicken this back up. All right, I will get some powdered sugar and we'll add a little bit in just to make this a little thicker so it doesn't run right off the edge of our cookies. All right, there's 1 spoonful of powdered sugar. And let's see how that affects the consistency. Now, what I'm using here is a little rubber spatula that is great for mixing up icing because of the fact that you can easily scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl while you're mixing. I like the smaller size of this for doing these smaller color mixing because it's easier than trying to work with a giant spatula in a small bowl. But obviously you can use anything you happen to have on hand to mix your icing. Any spoon would be fine, or a spatula. But this is my favorite way to mix up the colors. It's just easy to do. Okay, this still is pretty liquidy. I'm gonna add another spoonful of powdered sugar to it. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. At this point, this is basically a 15-second consistency, which is okay. but I think I'm going to add 1 more scoop of powdered sugar to try to bring it up to that 20-second consistency. Okay, this is looking a lot thicker now. You can see how when I scrape it away, it leaves a shape, an indentation from where I scraped it. It doesn't immediately fill it all in. So let's count that and see. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. This looks perfect. And then I have to give it a little bit of a jiggle just to get it completely flat, and that's exactly what I want. That's what I'm looking for. Great. I'm just breaking up some of the air bubbles that came up to the surface. When you're piping and you're squeezing the icing out of the bag, if there's an air bubble, sometimes it can just come out of there as a break in your icing. It's not really a big deal, it's not the end of the world, but breaking up some of the air bubbles while they're in the bowl can't hurt. That's what I figured. Okay, so again, we're going to do 2 different bags. We're going to do 1 bag that has a larger quantity of red for the bowling ball, and then another bag that has a smaller quantity to use for the detail lines on the bowling pin, because that one will have a smaller hole cut in the bag for that. So I think what I'll do is I'll just do the detail lines first. Just a little bit more. Don't need much for that. And since this is a small amount in the bag, I'm able to just tie a knot in the top. Now, one thing to know is that some of these colors will continue to develop and get darker and more concentrated over time. So with red, sometimes if you feel like you're struggling and not getting a really nice deep true red, if you let it sit for a while, the color can continue to develop and get more concentrated. I'm happy with how this looks, the way it is, and if it gets a little bit darker red, I'm okay with that too. So, all right, just breaking up some of those air bubbles that were on the surface, and now we're going to scrape all the rest of this into my other bag here. And I'm going to clip it with the bag clip, and our red is ready to go. All right, last color we're going to mix up is going to be black. All right, so I have a trick for black I'm going to share with you. Black can be a tricky color. It can be hard to get it to be super black because it's just such a dark color. One thing that you can do to make it easier is you can use this black Dutched cocoa powder. I got this from Amazon. This is the Cocoa Trader brand, and like I said, it's called black Dutched cocoa powder. So this is not regular cocoa powder. It's not brown. it's black. And the way that it tastes, to me, reminds me of an Oreo cookie. If you think about the Oreo cookie, how those cookies are black, not brown, I think they might use this kind of cocoa powder in them because this is kind of what it tastes like. It doesn't have a super strong chocolatey flavor, mostly because we're not using a huge amount of it, but it definitely will change the flavor of your icing to a more chocolatey flavor. Okay, now for what we're using it for, 3 little dots on our bowling ball, it's definitely not going to affect the flavor at all. But the whole reason to use some of this is just simply so that we don't have to use quite as much food coloring to get that true black color. All right, so we're not going to need much of this at all. I'm just going to do 1 scoop, and then I'm going to go ahead and cover this bowl up so that this does not crust over, since I want to keep it soft for the future. So I'm actually going to start by adding a little bit of the cocoa powder to the icing and see what color we end up with. And then, depending on how it looks, I can add a little bit of my black food coloring as well. Now, since this is a powder, this will thicken up our icing the same way that the powdered sugar did. And I am okay with that. Since I'm just doing 3 little accent dots on the bowling balls, it's going to be totally fine with me if it's a nice thick consistency. Now, another trick to get a nice dark color is if you have some leftover icing from another decorating project, you can combine other colors, just mix them up, and any darkness in other colors will make it easier for you to get to that black. Instead of going straight from white to black, you're going from, already pigmented icing. That can make it easier to achieve that black color with less black food coloring. So what I'm doing right now is I'm really kind of pushing down while I'm mixing onto the bottom of the bowl to try to get all of those little dry clumps of the cocoa powder broken up and mixed in so that they're not leaving any clumps in the icing. All right, so you can see the color we've got right now is close to black, and honestly I would be fine with this on the cookies, but I'll add a little bit of black food coloring just to see if we can get a little bit blacker. It's like a very dark gray right now. I would say maybe like a charcoal. All right, I'll just do 1 squirt of black. Okay, we'll mix that in, and now it's looking very black. So this would have taken a lot more of that black food coloring to achieve this black color if we hadn't used the cocoa powder first. You could use brown cocoa powder just to get it darker to start with. Then you would be starting with a brown color, and it would still help you to need less black food coloring. But this stuff is the best for black because it's legitimately black colored already instead of brown. Okay, so now you can see we've got real black here. It is black, black. Perfect. All right, so let's fill up our final piping bag. And again, I'm just going to tie it off on the top since I have enough space to do that. Okay, so we are ready to go. We have our 2 white bags, our 2 red bags, and our black bag. And now we're ready to decorate some bowling cookies.